Anyway, so my name's Geoff Quickfall. I'm from Vancouver, and we're going to do this video right now. We're going to get it over with, and it'll be fast. It'll only be about 10 minutes instead of 15 or 20 that you want me to do it in. Or can I talk normally?
Oh, yeah.
I do commercials, too. All those drug commercials where you hear me at the end. Hello, everybody. My name's Geoff, and anybody know what that means? It's here to just grab your attention while you're all talking until I get to the actual topic. But HTTP error code 451?
It's imperative.
Paper burning temperature.
Well, the 451 is.
It's not.
And I think that, but it's not. That's not when paper burns. It's just what the movie was like, Ray Bradbury, or the book. However, the guy that named this error code 451, it was his little inside joke. Because that error code is you have just tried accessing a government-sensitive site.
It's not so much government.
Any secure site.
Well, it's intended that
Here, Eric.
it's intended that code be used if you get, for instance, a legal order saying you cannot serve up that content for legal reasons. So the government is censoring.
See, I knew there was one.
There's always one.
Thank you, Eric. So now that we have your attention. Uh-oh. So how many have smartwatches? Okay, how many have analog watches? Okay, all those that have an analog watch on, put your hand in the air, but don't look at it. Who has it? Okay, you got analog watches. Now, how long have you had your watch?
Oh, many, many years.
Okay, and how many times a day do you look at it?
Oh, hundreds.
Okay, now, before you look at it, does it have a 12, a 3, a 6, and a 9? Or does it have numbers all the way around? Or is it dots and dots, and a 12 only at this noon?
All the way around.
Okay, now take a look at it.
Dots.
Difference between observing and seeing, which has nothing to do with this talk. But if you have an analog watch, is it a smartwatch? Would you call your analog time only, hour, minute, second watch a smartwatch? I would. Now, all these are in my collection. I restore watches along with radios and computers. And no, I'm not writing a book. This is a 1917 Omega sterling silver, and it can keep time. Well, that's pretty smart. Hours, minutes, seconds. What else can you do with an hour, minute, seconds watch? In fact, not only can you time, and you can time an event, but you need a pencil. You got to remember when you start at the seconds, the minutes, and the hours. You got to note it down. Or you can do this. You can time for exactly 36 seconds, count the number of things that happen in that 30 seconds, and multiply it by 100. So, for example, if I speak 60 words a minute, or 60 words in 30 seconds, that's 6,000 words an hour. No, I'm not. You want me to, but I'm not. So that's pretty smart. And all you've got is an analog watch with hours, minutes, and seconds. So what else can you do? Well, it's round. I am going pretty fast here, but it is late. It's round, but compasses are round. So what can we do with a watch that's analog, tells hours, minutes, and seconds? Forget the rest of the stuff on that. In the northern hemisphere, you can determine where north and south is. It's right there on the picture if you want to take a look at it. This is a 1964 Seiko chronograph. It's the first one they ever made. It was for the 1964 Olympics. It's their first adventure into it. It's a rather rare watch, but as you see, I don't have my pointer. The sunlight, obviously, is the big yellow thing there, and it's pointing down. You line up the hour hand with the sunlight with a toothpick, the shadow over the hour hand. Halfway between the hour hand and noon is, in the northern hemisphere, south. In the southern hemisphere, it's the other way around. Weird, eh? Or sorry, you're American. Weird, huh? But there is a caveat. It only works during the day. No, I've tried. And ask me how. As you continue, is that smart enough? I mean, hours, minutes, seconds, that's all it does. Now you got a compass. Now you got something that times the rate. You got something that tells you what time of day it is. And it tells you how long somebody's gone over the limit when they're only supposed to talk for 30 minutes. Well, let's add some more doodads to it. Can we add doodads to a watch? Well, here's a 1935 pilot's watch. They added a doodad right up here. And this knurled ring turns. So in this case, this person's timing for minutes. So he started it at 4 minutes past, and if he timed an event, he can tell where his indicator was, his aide-memoire, and he knows how much time's gone by. But can you apply that anywhere else? Because now you're timing an event, and you have an aid that tells you when you started the whole timing event in its minute-wise. You can also time for hours. It's a 1925 Omega, and he's lined it up on the 10 hours, and maybe he's got a 1-hour timing event that he has to know about, and there's his aide de memoire. He doesn't need the pencil and the paper, and he doesn't have to remember. Now that's still, what's it do? It's still an hour, minute, second, and this is before a smartwatch and calculators. We got slide rules going on here, but we have a timer. So what else can you do with those memoirs? Well, you can make a time for departure if you're leaving somewhere, or well, you can read the thing here. Next fuel check, next brake start. Possibilities are endless for where you want to set the memoir, whether it's hours, whether it's minutes. I'll get out of your way here. I can't get out of your way.
Thank you.
So we can add more doodads, because that was just a doodad on the outside of the watch. What can we do to the mechanism? We can add another dial to the mechanism. Well, by the way, 1917, hand-painted dial.
You've got a red pointer
Pardon me?
in the middle of your clicker.
Oh, I do have a pointer. 1917, I've added a 30-minute dial. You push this button on the top, the sweep second hand starts to rotate. Every time it goes around 1 minute, this counts off a minute. So now you have an aide de memoire that tells you how many minutes have passed. It only times to 30. You can remember when you started the watch, and you can write down the hour time, and you can time for as long as you want. So we've added a whole new gearing system inside the mechanism to get you to that point. It's called a chronoscope, not a chronograph. A chronograph is an incorrect name for a watch that times because it doesn't graph. It just displays. So the correct terminology, which they got right in the 1920s, was chronograph. We continue, we'll look at the scales later. We'll go for the next one. We need a watch capable of timing longer events than a minute. So what are we going to do? We can add another gearing system. And that gearing system can time the hours. So now when you start this push button, the sweep second hand goes around, counts off the minutes. This goes around twice, you count off an hour. And that's good for when you're flying an airplane for more than 9 hours, etc. Now you can start it when you take off, stop it when you land, and there's your chronoscope. You don't have to need the pencil, the paper, and anything else. Away you go. Again, hand-painted dial, fired in enamel. Typically by 12-year-old girls in Switzerland, not a joke, seriously. And I've replaced the luminous with luminova, and I've removed the radium paste that they used until the 1950s.
That's what she died.
I have a lead container jar that was given to me by the university. I spritz the dial when I remove it to remove the dust. Then I remove it with a lacquer and put that residue into the jar, which over 45 years has not filled up. And then I get the United States Navy to determine where the radioactivity is, and then they raid my garage. But that hasn't happened yet. So now we have an interesting watch. We've got a 12-hour counter, 30-minute counter, a sweep second hand. So we're getting pretty accurate. But we can also do the compass, and we can also time an event. We can tell the time. So if we continue, here's a 1917 Omega. We can now add scales to the watch. We've already got a pretty smart watch, and all it does is hours, minutes, and seconds, and then we've added a couple of gearing systems. Now we have an ability to add doodads to the dial. The doodad in this case is a double scale. And if you look at this outer ring in blue, you'll see it goes to 60. And then you switch to the inner ring in red, and it's 30 up here. So you actually can time an event that takes more timing than a minute to count what's going on, like if you go by a mile marker, but we'll get to that in a second. It's called a tachymeter or a rate meter. It'll rate meter anything. It'll rate meter what we call in aviation hoopties. Hoopties can be miles per hour, knots, kilometers. It can be, a hoopty can be an exchange rate. It's just a general term for anything you want to calculate or time, especially in a rate. That's a close-up of the dial. Again, hand-painted. So getting back to those girls in 1917 with the radium paint, they were all dead by 1945. By 1950, they'd stopped using radium and switched to tritium, which is radioactive hydrogen or hydrogen-3, which can't penetrate paper. Now, as long as this radium is in the watch with the case on it, you don't have to worry. When you pull that cover off and start breathing the dust in, you got to worry. So, a lot of things. So, if you read this, speed meter, again, it's a rate meter. For the heck of it, miles per hour, knots, kilometers can be treated as units. And distance and passing a production line of time. So a kilometer is just distance. So on the airplane, I'd start the sweep second hand when my little distant measuring equipment hit 0. And when it hit 1 or 2, I would stop the watch and I'd read off the scale, and in that case it would be knots. So why don't we see that? Come on. Next. Oh, right. Well, let's get to this. You can appreciate this, Dave. Yep. So you got yourself a Bugatti Chiron. Chiron. See, I knew there was somebody in here that would do that. So now we got the Bugatti. We got a tachymeter. We're going to measure hoopties per hour. Gain, knots, kilometers, whatever you want to substitute the word hoopties for. Away we go. Hoopties to find anything you want to measure. Back to the Bugatti. So here's a 1970 Bull. It's called the Stars and Stripes. Anybody know why? That's its nickname. It was actually designed in competition with the Omega Speedmaster for the Apollo space program when the competition came up, but it failed, along with the Rolex, the Longines, the LeCoultre. In any case, you're taking a look at this, and now, Eric, pay attention. How do we actually do it? You pass the mile marker. You see it go by on the highway. You got those down here? We got kilometer markers. They go by a lot faster. Anyway, they go by the mile marker, and you, okay, where's the cursor? There we go. And this is an apple. You start the timer. Now you got to wait till you hit the second mile marker. Now remember, this is a Bugatti Chiron. So I pushed the pusher because I just went by the second marker. A mile has gone by. So how fast am I traveling? I'm going 400 miles an hour, which raises a very important question. Did you follow that? It's a pretty easy thing to do with the watch. So now we have something that's time to rate. It's actually checked our speedometer. You can have a GPS. You can see if it's working correctly. The problem is, what's the fine for doing 400 miles an hour? And who's going to catch you? Oh, I knew Dave would have an answer. Chiron can't do that. It does 325. I know, but he's got a tailwind. Work with me. Thank you, Dave. I've done the research. As Geoff said, I've done the research.
Do this examining on the right track, you aren't fined.
Yeah, you aren't fined if you're in the right lane. Not the left lane, the right lane. Oh, the correct lane. Thank you.
Now, if in Canada, if your markers are,
kilometers, he's doing
if they're almost twice
1.6 times that.
Aren't they wasting a lot of energy having those markers move so fast?
No, they do it every 10K now. It's kind of boring. So let's take a look at one of these. What other doodads and scales? There are millions. There's lots of scales you can stick in. But let's take a look at this middle scale. Now remember, this watch is the size of your standard analog. That's hand painted and fired on enamel. But in this case, you enter where the arrow is. That's your first minute. Then you hit here, and you're on the second inner scale, and you can time for another minute. And then you can go a third time around to the top. So what does that mean? For example, you pass the mile marker, you start the watch. No, you don't start the watch. Okay, well, you're supposed to start the watch and not see the red thing. Come on.
At 300 kilometers an hour.
It's not doing it. So what happens here is you start the watch, and for some reason, because it's not an IBM, I can't push the button and get the watch to work on this. So Eric, I don't know why.
Here in the US, we don't use kilometers.
No. So the problem here is you passed it, you started your timing, but you haven't hit the first mile marker yet. You hit the first mile marker on the inner circle after a minute went by at 30, how many seconds? Oh, I think I got that wrong. 95 seconds. Yeah, 95 seconds. So right here. So I'm doing 42.5 miles an hour. Now that's obviously my 73 Celica and not the Bugatti Chiron. Celica. There's no such word. It's the Japanese make words up for their cars, so they can patent the name and you can't duplicate it.
You have to put the emphasis on the right syllable.
You got to put the emphasis on the right syllable. Yeah, and I took the Evan Lewis Sped-Ridden course, and I know what to do here. So other common scales. Here's an interesting one: the Tachymeter scale. And in German, if it's miles, it's the Tachymeter scale. So in Europe, they do the kilometers. The export versions of these watches from Switzerland would have miles. So you have a telemeter. But what is it? The telemeter scale is on the outside of this watch. So it has two separate scales, a tachymeter and a telemeter. And you can read right off here that the telemeter is calibrated. It's calibrated for a standard day. We know that that's 15 degrees C, 2992 inches, or European 1013.2 hectopascals. And at sea level, well, what's the speed of sound? It's based on temperature at sea level. So if you're measuring sound, which is what this is doing, you're going to have to correct that for your temperature, whatever it is, from non-standard. So temperature difference, corrections must be made, apply using tables, export dials are miles. Here is an example of the tables and the difference of the speed of sound at sea level based on temperature. You can also, the variation on altitude is not that much when you're a human below 6,000 feet. So why?
I'm not going to go to sea level if it gets to 100 C there.
Well, well, you know, there are a lot of people that do that. I mean, I was in Mumbai, it was 128. I mean, that's centigrade. No, that's Fahrenheit. Yeah, no, the eggs weren't cooking. That was Fahrenheit. So what we'll do is see this in use. And what would we use that telemeter for? Well, that was an artillery watch you just saw. So you're sitting there with your periscope in your trench and you're looking over and you see the emplacement of the enemy and you start your timer when you see the lightning. And there she goes. When you hear the sound, who's doing that? When you hear the sound, you stop the sweep second hand and you read off, and I'm looking about 2.9 kilometers away. So now I know how to set the azimuth. Or if it's a lightning storm, thunderstorm, start the timing with the lightning, hear the thunder, stop the timing, that's how far away it is. But if you want to see if it's coming at you, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, and see if it's coming shorter and coming to you or not. So that's how you would use the outside scale telemeter. Could be miles per hour, it could be kilometers per hour, as this example is. How about other scales to make this a smartwatch or even smarter if you're medical? Now, this one's not in my collection. I have no reason to be measuring my pulse. My wife does once in a while, but I don't. So this one, you have to count 30 beats on the wrist, 30 pulsations or 30 heartbeats, and then you read off whatever it says. Some of them are 15 heartbeats, some of them are 5. If you shrink the time, because it's a logarithmic scale, your error, it's not as refined at the shorter end as it is at the longer end. Are there other scales? Well, these guys like decimal. In fact, I think it was Napoleon who wanted to invent a decimal clock, but it didn't catch on. They're just doing a tachymeter, but in decimal. How many units per 100, per hour, per minute, however you're timing it. So you can see that smartwatches, again, this one is a full 30-minute counter and a 12-hour counter, plus it's got a decimal for production rate. If you're measuring 5 articles off a production line in 10 seconds or whatever, you can see by the decimal what you're doing. Then we get to people like Charles Lindbergh, who really loved watches and loved navigation. He came up with this. It's actually called the Charles Lindbergh hour angle watch. Now, I'm not going to get into how you do this because I'll show you the write-up on how he did it. But longitude is a big thing traveling. If anybody see the movie Longitude or read the book? Right. Well, this is how you get it by knowing your ground speed and your time and your departure point. You can set the outside bezel. You undo this clamp and you turn the inner ring, and you can get your longitude, hours, minutes, and seconds off the watch, given a known ground speed, which you've computed for points along the ground that you know the known distance for. It's pretty intense, but he didn't have a GPS. He didn't have IRSs, he didn't have INSs, he had his watch, and no freaking window on his cockpit. He had a periscope.
Dead reckoning.
Well, not only dead reckoning, but a periscope. How do you, anyway, so we get into that. Here is the actual math, and we won't stay on here, but there's the actual math on how to set an hour angle. Now, all these watches you see, as I said, are my collection, but that's not how they came. These were basket cases. These were going in the garbage. These were things at a flea market. And my job is to fully restore them So now, well, here's one, Ben Russ, Sky Chief. So I'm going to point a little doodad out. We still got the hours, minutes, seconds. We can still time events up to 12 hours. We can still use it as a compass. But do you notice that? That little line and that little line. Gunter will like this. They're every 4 minutes. Now, why would Ben Russ put 4-minute hacks on the minute wheel? So that's a 30-minute counter. There's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, 20, 25, 30. When you start the sweep second hand and it goes around once, it counts off a minute. Counts off 2 minutes, counts off 3, goes around twice, it counts off the hours. But why do we have 4-minute hacks? Well, it just so happens it's secrets in the word. It's the Sky Chief. This is the #1 watch for all Pan Am Clipper pilots that did the float flying across the Atlantic in the 30s and 40s. Well, why did they need a 4-minute hack? Well, they had an astrodome. They had to pull the curtain back, stick their head out the astrodome, get their astrolabe out, and shoot the stars. And when you shoot your stars, you have a book. And the book is based on 4-minute timings on specific stars. And the 4-minute timing allows you to get on the stool, stick your head through, do the star shot, get back down at the navigator's table, write down the shot in your little file book, you get back up, repeat exercise for 4 minutes, get down, record, get back up 4 minutes, get down, record, and you got your ground speed, you got your whatever navigation you're looking at. So those are called navigation, and this is the only watch that had those. And again, 1940, Ben Russ, 4-minute, consult your navigation tables, helps you on every set. So what else can we do? Well, we get this guy. You should have seen this one when I got it. It was in a shoebox. This one has it every 3 minutes. Well, actually, it's got a 3-minute mark there. There's 4, there's 5, 6. A lot of them have 9. So you're reading ahead, of course. Anybody remember rotary dial phones? Hands up. Okay, that's all the people with no hair and gray. Number 2, about that. Anybody here remember Sunday after, all day Sunday and after 6 p.m. for call cost? There was none of this Skype. It was long distance. You got a rate after 6 in the evening. You got a rate all day Sunday. I spent $1,400 in the first month on that plan, talking to my new girlfriend that I proposed to and married. And I told her, I can't keep doing this. I was across the country. So what are those 3-minute hacks for? Well, guess what? They charged every 3 minutes. They charged you a rate for 3 minutes. It was the same rate if you talked for a minute. It was the same rate if you talked to 2. And if you talked for 3 in 1 second, you got charged for 6. So you started the watch, you made your phone call, got connected, started the watch, and if you went 1 second over that little mark, you could talk to that mark, and it was the same price. And if you have the 9-minute ones, you end up with the following. Some watches have a 9-minute hack for those long shopping lists that you have to deal with before you're allowed to come home. So some of them had an extra hack mark at the 9-minute point. So there's another smartwatch, probably designed by my wife, but anyway, there you go. Well, circular slide rules. Hello, slide rule girl. Circular slide rules. Well, watches are circular. Wonder what we can do with that. Citizen Logmaster. This is my favorite slide rule watch. This is about 1965 to 67. They are extremely rare. Again, the person who had that, I wasn't about to educate him, and it didn't look like this. But I love this because it's actually telling you the scale. Do you see that little knurled ring? This is internal, so it doesn't wear out, doesn't rub off because you're doing it. You'll see some of those examples. And I love this watch because it has one gauge symbol on it, the pi. So now we've turned this into a calculator. Well, that's wonderful. Let's get a little busier. Seiko, 1975, very interesting watch. Automatic wind, one of the first, date. It has a 12-hour counter, a 30-minute counter, a sweep second hand, a start-stop button, and a reset button, and this one winds. But now, all this on the outside, and we only have one gauge mark. pi. Do you notice up here, it's still the CD scale. You see the C and the D. And this one, put a cursor on it. So now you can do your math, do that just like a standard circular slide rule with the full cursor. Pretty slick. So now your smartwatch is an incredible math machine. Now we got to take it to the next level. This is a dedicated slide rule. And what? Time out?
5 minutes.
Okay, I got to go now. Are we enjoying ourselves? I'll speed it up. This one's for pilots. Now, what's the difference on this? Well, all they did was shift the one scale over here and make the 60 minutes. And make that the prominent scale. Now look at your gauge marks. Kilometers, statute miles, nautical miles. You have a time scale on the outside. These watches are absolutely wonderful when you're at the market in Beijing and you set the exchange rate up. And then all you do is look at the price, look at your watch, and convert. You don't have to push buttons. You don't need batteries. And you astound the 24-year-old who has no idea what numbers are. Again, you've got the 30-minute counter, and you've got, now this is just a standard hours, minutes, seconds. It's a different version. It's by a company called O&W. And I'll give you a little thing here. Take a look. Come on back. That's miles per hour. That could be kilometers per hour. It's just a rate meter. It could be hoopties per hour. Again, this watch for the American market, miles per hour. And our hack marks here, our gauge marks, are pressure altitude, very interesting. Standard altitude, nautical miles, statute miles, kilometers will be up here somewhere. And no pi. Math isn't its big whiz. It's about navigation, speed, rates, fuel. Then we get too much information. By the way, the guy that designed this, Mark Newsom, anybody know who he is? No, you don't. Yeah, the Apple guy who is on their design team now since 2003. This was his company. And isn't this amazing? It's called the iPod, and this is 1998. So where do you think they got the iPod from? But when I say TMI, I mean, come on, people. Yeah, hours, meters, liters, true altitude, pressure, distance, fuel, nautical miles, statute, fuel, pounds. And it's upside down to the standard watch. Dave will know this. It's a Valjoux 7750, so why is the winding crown on the left? They rotated 180 degrees because pilots want the cursor on their right hand. So they're using their right hand to run the slide rule. So he thought of it. The second thing he did is when you pull this out, only the hour hand moves for when you change time zones. And this tells you if it's night or day. Alan Shepard would have loved that with his 12-hour clock going around in his Breitling. What, 2 minutes? I don't think we have to stay much more on that. Of course, the tech industry came in. That's a huge aircraft module. And it times up to 99 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds. Its accuracy is 15 seconds a month, probably around there. Again, it's a standard Breitling, miles per hour. And it's got the standard pilot, and it's obviously a pilot watch because they got kilometers on this one. See? You can call it anything you want. Since we are getting cut here on time, and a friend of mine worked for Hughes. And Hughes took 200,000 of these obsolete things and threw them in the garbage dump. And he ran out there with a cardboard box, I think it was 2 shoe boxes, and hid them in his garage. Now, I bet you, I think 12,000 of these watches were made. Probably 200-300 of them work. But I've got 5 modules. You can't do much with these modules, especially if they're destroyed by batteries. But again, we have a smartwatch, and we've entered the digital age. The reason this wasn't made very long is because somebody invented LCDs. And they didn't need 2 357 batteries that lasted 6 months, unless you were with Radio Shack, got a $5 guarantee, and drove them bankrupt because you kept filling these in, because they kept dying within 5 months, even though you had a 1-year guarantee. And they just never caught on when I kept going in there and getting new batteries for free. It's the same standard. We have a Breitling, it's got the kilometers, and it's another math whiz. Well, of course, what's the next evolution in a smartwatch? Well, get rid of the hands. Well, now it's not a compass, right? But what does it do? And this build quality is a sapphire crystal layer, all stainless steel, including the buttons. 4 batteries, 357s, first calculator watch on the planet. Beautiful. And they have the next one up where you just flipped your wrist, and there's a mercury switch inside, and it does the display. And it's hours, minutes, seconds, and day, date, and week. So, anybody watch Battlestar Galactica? The original?
Yeah, good one, yeah.
Right. Does that not look like a Cylon? Well, guess what this is? This is the watch they all wore on the movie set. Every single one of them, all of them had to wear the Battlestar, but it was in gold plate. And the build quality on here is the cheapest piece of whatever, but still, it's wonderful. These all function, LED, 1977, plexiglass, 4 357 batteries, etc. And it does basic math. You can do your tip function on here with the percent key. Uh-oh, we are at Hewlett-Packard after all. So if anybody wants to see this one, I'm wearing it. That's a prototype. I've got all raised keys. Every key. I don't know if you're familiar with the HP01, but the only raised keys on an HP01, time, minute, alpha, delta, and that way you don't accidentally turn it on by bumping it. You can get the recess, start, and stop, and I'm not going to go any further on this watch, and there's a reason. It's the apex of geekdom. Come on, where are we? You know, it's the acme of coolness. Where are we? The point is, I did do a whole talk on this back in 2019. So if you want, or 16. So if you want to take all the information on what this does, because guess what? It doesn't do the compass, but it does the rate. It'll actually publish the rate on the dial of anything you're timing. It'll give me the miles to get to London by multiplying my ground speed times the timer function. If I'm flying 9 hours, I put 9 hours into the timer, I hit it when I take off, it starts to count down. I multiply that by miles, and now I'm counting down the nautical miles. But of course, that's given if the ground speed doesn't change, which it does, especially if I get paid by the minute. We're almost done there. If we get paid by the minute, we tend to go slower. Doesn't that ever bother you when the captain says, we're leaving a little bit late, but we'll pick up the speed and try to make the time up? Well, wait a second. Isn't that why I'm on the airplane in the first place? Jerry Seinfeld. Yeah, got on the airplane to go fast in the first place. I'm getting looks. Watch spelt the demise of the LED. Same year that I'm almost done. The same year that
7 minutes over now.
okay, well, I'm almost not done. The Seiko came out, 1 battery, same year as this 4-page manual, not 127 pages. And people could handle it, but it came out with a tiny little steel pen for tiny little pointers. So in 1978, they improved it. You can actually use your finger on that one. I'm supposed to go faster now. What else do we have? There's Citizen's calculator watch. This is a very interesting watch. I have a big chip on the top. I got to replace that glass, but what is it? It's the world's first. Scientific. Full exponential, full scientific notation. 8-digit display. I think it's 10 digits accuracy. But same year as the HPO1. Now that's what the HPO2 should have been. In stainless steel, not gold-plated brass. But I love the name, National Semiconductor. How can you go wrong with that name? That's like Consolidated Vultee. They built airplanes, not Airbus. I don't drive buses. What else? Jim, are you there? You've seen this one, the Casa. It's too bad these lights can't be turned off. That is a full, they can?
Yeah, Richard Schwartz.
Thank you.
Flip the switch.
No, it's being hit. Give you, there you go. It's a full orrery. You can select, dial in your date up to 2200 or 22nd century, and it positions all the planets for you. You press another button, and Halley's Comet slides right across both displays, and you can predict all the way up to the 23rd century when Halley's Comet is coming. You know, I mean, it's things you have to know. And then they made the moon graph, and this was taken just the other day in the middle. Well, you can see the date. No, you can't. Can you see the date? Yeah, Saturday, well, whatever. Yeah, 9th, 30th of October. So it was a full moon. So this one has a moon phase. So these are pretty smart. And they're before the smartwatch. Oh, little Jim Donnelly here. We always have to bow when he arrives. There's Jim's Planetary Ori, and there is my refurbished Seiko Planetary Ori in the middle of it. Hi there, Jim. It's still front and center in the living room. This will go quickly. 1945, it's known as the Hollywood watch. Everybody in Hollywood had to have this watch. What does it do? Well, you set with that, the outside ring. You swing the outside ring so that the date lines up with the day of the week that you're looking at. And then you can predict the rest of the dates for the rest of the month. So you got day, date, month, and a sort of a monthly itinerary ahead of time, as opposed to your standard analog, which might just have a day and a date, and you have to do it in your head, and you get it wrong. And you don't get the wedding band on time for the wedding. Oh, sorry, different story. But, you know, if I had one of those, I might have gotten that right. Same, another TMI. But this one does a bunch of things. There's your 12-hour counter. There's two hands here. The one that looks like an airplane is the minute counter. So it'll count the minutes. That counts the hours. There's a sweep second hand, but 15, 10, 5, 0, regate. It's a sailing watch for a sailing race. They start every 5 minutes, and you're told you're starting at 10 after or 5. You start the sweep second hand. When your minute hand hits that point, off you go. But it also, whoops, you'll notice it also has the tachymeter, but it starts further down the line. And it's got that same calendar in there. You look up the 30th, the 30th is a Saturday, Sunday is the 1st. Well, now you got a problem because I did it at the end of the month. But you just rotate her over. Other smartwatches, we won't get into them, but we have a 24-hour dial here. 2 time zones. You rotate the bezel to the other time zone. I have a 7-hour offset, so the red hand is GMT. The hour hand here is local. So you got 2. Here's one, 3 time zones. Same 24-hour hand in the middle here. You got a 24-hour dial which rotates, and you have an outer ring with a cursor. So this one just happens to be set up for Vancouver, GMT, and Karachi. Anybody in Karachi? No, fine. Diving watches, who dives? Anybody scuba dive? We don't use these anymore, but this is before computerized dive watches. And this is the United States Navy, no decompression, time zone or time check. So if you're going, I don't know how readable this is, but this is the time scale inside. So if you're at 45 feet, you can be down there for 10 minutes and you don't have to decompress to come back up. If you're over that time limit, and there are charts for that, but that was the first scuba dive watch that actually put it on a bezel. And then there's this one, which I just love using. I've got 2 more slides. That is my pilot security going through security watch. And other people have seen this as I saw yours and I had to have one. So I picked one up and then I made the label up and then I go through security and typically the question is, what is it? When I say smart, you know, it's a watch. Well, what does it do? Which kind of stops me dead for a second. And I say, well, tell us the time. And then they say, well, make it work. So I make it work, and then they see these Nixie tubes flashing in their yellow gold radioactive display. And they say, where did you get it? And I say, well, I got it in North Korea. And they told me if it starts to count down, to put it down and walk away. It takes me an extra 20 minutes to get through security in uniform, but it's well worth it. That's not all, everyone. Because, I forget that. Where's your Latin? I know, Mark will know. Time is out. Time has ended. Not tempus fugit, tempus expletive. It's expired. Time's expired. There you go, everybody. If you have any questions, ask me after.